Do we want to give it a few more minutes?
Yeah, maybe just a minute.
Okay. Well, I know our numbers are still climbing a little bit, but I think I'll go ahead and get going. I think you have recording on. All right, I got the thumbs up to go ahead and get going. Everyone, thank you so much for attending this meeting tonight. Obviously, tonight we're going to talk about the potential of designating the Yampa River as over-appropriated. A good portion of the Yampa River is already over-appropriated, but I will be showing some maps to show you what portion of the Yampa would be designated over-appropriated. Before I dive in though, however, I do want to introduce a couple folks on the phone. Some of them you already know, others maybe you don't. On the phone with me right now and really helping me host the meeting is Chris Arend. Chris Arend is our communications director with the Department of Natural Resources. And then we also have Tracy Kozlov, who is our deputy state engineer, and then Kevin Ryan, our state engineer, is also in attendance. Lastly, I will mention that I'm sure we have several of our water commissioners on the line. I see several names of our water commissioners and other employees with the Division of Water Resources here in Division 6. So thanks to them for also attending. So with that, I do want to go ahead and get started. I'm going to present my screen. And we'll get going. Let's see, got to get this on screen share. Hold on. All right. Okay, Chris, you want to nod your head if this is sharing properly? Does it look got the presentation up? Awesome. All right. Well, let's get going. So just so everybody knows, I think I need to start off by telling you that I have made a request to the state engineer to designate the Yampa River over appropriated. And so tonight I really want to talk to you about what that means and where we go from here. So let's start out by first understanding what over-appropriation means. And over-appropriation is a stream system, or a stream system is considered over-appropriated when at some time or all times of the year, not all the water rights can be met by the water available in the stream system. So what part of the basin, you know, like I said, I've made a request to the state engineer to designate a part of the Yampa River as over-appropriated. And I want to show you a map here next that shows what that part is. But before doing that, as you can tell from this slide here, the proposed area is an area upstream of the confluence of the Yampa River and the Little Snake River. The reason for that is we, as many of you know, had administration both 2018 and in 2020. And the calling structure, or the calling location where we administer water to, was at the Lilly Park structures. And the lowest Lilly Park structure is located essentially right at the confluence of the Little Snake and the Yampa River. So that's why I've selected that point to be the point where everything upstream of that would be designated over appropriated. And with that, let me show you a map. So this map is a map of Division 6. What you see is either a shaded green, yellow, or kind of a peachy pink color. The green area is right now not considered critical. And as we go through this, I typically use the word over appropriated, but another word we sometimes use is critical or not critical. Not critical, obviously analogous to not over appropriated. So, and you can see that in the map key at the bottom of the screen there. We use the terms critical and not critical. So the green area is not critical and not being considered, but of course that's not the Yampa River. We have the White River, the Green River, and the North Platte in here as well. And then you'll see also that the Little Snake River is not being considered for over appropriation at this time. So the peachy pink areas, the areas that are the areas that are already considered over appropriated, and the yellow area would be what is designated over appropriated if the state engineer confirms my request to designate it over appropriate or recommendation. But I want to dive into this area a little bit more. Since we're looking at all of Division 6, I wanted to dive into just 3 of my districts. So the main areas we want to look at, just to give you a sense, way at the downstream end, bottom end, or far left of the screen of the District 44 is where the Lilly Park structures are located. So we'd be looking at the entire water District 44, that part of the basin, and then 57 and 58. You can, and those are districts 57 and 58. You can tell from those maps, it's shaded in green, those are the areas that are already designated over appropriated. And you can tell that water District 58, almost in its entirety, is already designated over appropriated. Those areas, that's obviously, you know, Steamboat Springs, Upstream, and then the Elk River primarily. Those are the main basins there that comprise of District 58 being over appropriated. Most of District 57 is not over appropriated, and then of course there's a big chunk of District 44. So everything that's not shaded green there, if this designation does occur, would ultimately turn green, if you will, on this map, and would be considered over appropriated. So this is, you know, most of the state already is over appropriated, and I wanted to just show the group here what is considered over appropriated today in the state of Colorado. And that's what this next map shows. This map doesn't show the entire state of Colorado. It's missing a lot of the eastern slope, primarily because the entire eastern slope is over appropriated and has been for decades. What's colored there in the kind of aqua color, if you will, are the areas not considered over appropriated today. And you can see that it's mostly the northwest part of the state and the southwest part of the state, which is just Divisions 6 and Division 7. So how I want to move now into explaining how over appropriation affects you as water users. And as a surface water right holder, or a potentially new surface water right holder, this designation does not affect you. However, if you are a person that's going to be pursuing a new junior appropriation and a new water right on the system, you do need to recognize that whether the system's over appropriated, given that we've had a call on the river, you should be aware that water may not always be available at the time you need it. As a junior water right holder, you would be curtailed in the event of a call with a very junior water right. So, that's surface water rights. More importantly, I think we really need to focus our attention on well permits. If you already have a well permit, this designation will not affect you. The only way it would affect you with an existing well permit is if for some reason you wanted to come in and change that well permit. By way of example, it's a case-by-case basis here, but by way of example, if your permit only allowed for one, is a residential well permit, and it only allowed for one dwelling, and you wanted to add a secondary dwelling unit, this designation could affect you depending on your situation. So really, but you know, more so than any existing well permit, really what's affected here is new well permits and how we go forward with issuing well permits in the future if the basin's designated over appropriated. So let's take a look at this. I've decided that maybe one of the easiest ways to go through the permitting process and give you a sense of how well permits are issued is to show these a couple flow diagrams. And we're going to start out with residential well permits. We also refer to these as exempt, which means they're exempt from administration. So take a minute here and imagine I'm a well permitter in the Denver office. What I do is I issue well permits, and recognize I put this in a very simplistic form. The process that our well permitters go through to actually issue a well permit is quite a bit more elaborate than this, and there's quite a larger flow diagram that they deal with, but I wanted to really bring this down into a real small, understandable form for you. So as a well permitter, if I get a well permit application, it's a residential well permit application, the first question I'm going to ask is the basin where this well permit's going to be located over appropriated? And if it's not, then I can issue a well permit for that well application that will allow for up to 3 single-family dwellings, 1 acre lawn and garden irrigation, and then domestic livestock watering. Note also, though, for residential well permit applications, this is also the application you would use just for livestock watering. So if an individual wanted to get a well permit for just livestock watering, and that's all, this is the application you would use. So it's this situation I'm going through is also applicable to livestock watering. Now that scenario I just mentioned is regardless of the lot size. So again, if the basin's not over appropriated, I have a 5 acre lot, I can come and get a well permit for those uses. However, if I have a lot that's 35 acres and the basin now is less than 35 acres and the basin is over appropriated, that's where situations change. Let's first look at, though, however, if my lot is more than 35 acres, basin's over appropriated, I have a lot more than 35 acres, kind of in that same situation where I can issue a well permit for up to 3 single-family dwellings, 1 acre lawn and garden irrigation, and domestic livestock watering. Where the situation really changes is where you have a lot that's less than 35 acres. In that scenario, a well permit can only be issued for in-house uses. Now, however, if there's a situation where I want uses, me as an applicant of this well permit application wants uses for more than in-house, you can pursue a plan for augmentation or a contract with an entity that has augmentation water available to them. However, in that situation, you would then be pursuing a general purpose well permit, which is where I want to turn to next, is general purpose well permits. And these permits are also known as non-exempt, so they're not exempt from administration. Here we have the same situation. Say I get an application in the Denver office and it's for a general purpose well permit. I'm going to ask the question, is the well going to be located in a basin that's over appropriated or not? If it's not going to be located in a basin that's over appropriated, for the most part, I can issue a well permit for pretty much any use, irrigation, industrial, or even I can plan on digging a pond that intercepts groundwater, and I can get that well permit without any problems, without any further action. However, if your basin becomes is over appropriated, where you want to put your new well is over appropriated, you will then have to pursue an augmentation plan in order to get that well permit. With that said, I think it's important to understand what augmentation means. And to define that, let's first understand that all groundwater is tributary. In the state of Colorado, we assume all groundwater is tributary to the surface water. So in other words, when you pump water from a well, we assume that at some point it is going to deplete and affect the surface waters. So when we say that you're going to have to augment your well, you're going to have to augment your depletions, because we know that pumping water from that well is affecting the surface water. Augmenting in this situation means that you're going to have to replace your depletions with some other source. Often that source is a reservoir or a pond that is decreed for that purpose. The only other way that you can get augmentation water is through dry up of irrigated land. So those are pretty much the two ways to obtain a water source for augmentation, is either to store water in priority in a pond that is then decreed and can be used to replace your depletions from your well, or you can go through a change of water right and dry up irrigated land and change the use of that water right from, say, irrigation to augmentation. So, you know, why is this so different between surface water rights and well permits? In a situation where we have a senior water right holder whose water rights not being met, say they're being injured by an upstream junior appropriator, As the Division of Water Resources and my water commissioners, they can go up and curtail or shut down that surface water right holder just by simply adjusting the head gate or pulling a pump. And then that action keeps that senior water right whole and keeps that senior water right from being injured. That's not so much the case with a well. As we all know, when you pump water from a well, its effect on the stream is delayed. And so we simply shutting off the well does not immediately provide water to that senior water right holder. And for that reason, you have to augment those depletions to assure you're not impacting and injuring that senior water right holder. So when a basin is not over appropriated, the state engineer can make a finding of no injury to the surface water right holders when issuing well permits. However, when a basin is over appropriated, the state engineer cannot make a finding of injury. And as such, the allowed uses under well permits is limited without a plan for augmentation. So again, as I mentioned earlier, I have made a request to the state engineer to designate the basin over appropriate, the one that I showed you earlier that was kind of in that yellow shaded area. In that request, I've written a lengthy report that's gone through evaluating many things, but I thought I would point out at least a handful of things that I've evaluated and looked at. One thing I've asked myself is, has there been a call on the river? And obviously, as I've indicated, yes, we have had a call both in 2018 and 2020. I also asked myself if there was other critical low flow years where a call could have happened, but for some reason it did not. And the answer to that question was yes. Again, as some of you may be aware, also there's been a lot of water released from our reservoirs, whether it's Stagecoach, Elkhead, and sometimes even Steamboat Lake, that was for non-consumptive purposes. And so I've gone through an evaluation of looking at what would the river have looked like if that non-consumptive storage release had not occurred, and just evaluated what the stream would have looked like without those inputs into the system. I've also looked at how much water has been appropriated in this basin. As you can imagine, we've had the issuance and we've decreed water rights here in this basin for over 120 years. And so we have a lot of water rights that have been decreed in this basin. And I've looked at those water rights, the quantity of those water rights, how much they're decreed for, and compared those to how much water is actually available in our streams. And then of course, I've looked at things like what has changed over time that would warrant this designation. Things such as the number of new water right applications, changes in stream flows. We're fortunate enough to have a gauge at the Yampa River Maybelle gauge that has over 100 years of record. And we can see how over time flows in the Yampa River have declined. They've gone from about 1.5 million acre feet per year to 1.1 million acre feet per year. And then of course, we've had the continuation of use of water through wells. So those are the things I evaluated. On this slide, but I've already talked about all these things, but I really want to hit some of these home to you. And, you know, the primary reason we look at designating a basin over appropriated is to protect senior water right holders from impacts of future groundwater development. The other thing I want to point out is who or what is affected, and it's really important to keep in mind that it's the issuance of well permits that is affected when a basin is designated over appropriated. And again, keep in mind that you can continue to pursue junior water right appropriations. So with that said, I'm pretty much going to wrap up with this last slide. And one thing I want to just point out is I really did purposely keep this presentation short. And the reason I kept this presentation short is the purpose of this meeting is public input. I really hope all of you can feel free to ask some questions as we go along here tonight. And I should have mentioned this up front. Please feel free to chat questions at any time. I know both Chris and Tracy are looking for any chats that might be coming through. And then here, like I said, this is my last slide. Feel free also to raise your hand or take yourself off mute if you want to verbally ask a question. So I encourage you to ask some questions here. So from this point forward, the state engineer will evaluate my request to designate the basin over appropriated. And if he determines that it is appropriate to designate this basin over appropriated, we will provide notice of this over appropriation through the substitute water supply plan notification lists and other public notice. In this notice, the notice will provide the date upon which the basin will be considered over appropriated. For example, and this is just an example, the state engineer may decide that as of May 1st, 2021, the basin is considered over appropriated. At that point, well permitting will change. So once this notification goes out through the substitute water supply plan notification and other notification, people will have 30 days to provide comments on this and continue to ask questions. And I'm always available for people to give me a call or email me questions. So I do ask for people to do that. So with that, like I said, I've really tried to keep this presentation short. I hope all of you take a minute to think about some questions you might have, and feel free to chat those or turn yourself off of mute. And I'm assuming, Chris, at this point, we don't have any chats?
We have one. Do you want to unshare your screen so we can?
Yeah, I will.
And if anyone would like to ask a question, you would just go to the participants down there and you can raise your hand and it'll pop up here. I should be able to see it. So the chat question we have is from Zach Hendricks, and it says, how does this affect the issuance of new storage water rights and or livestock water tanks?
Yeah, Zach, that's a good question. That's the same as with surface. So it doesn't affect it at all. Just like a surface water right, a storage water right can be administered in priority, and so we would just administer that storage water right. Livestock water tanks are the same. There's somewhat of a presumption of non-injury with livestock water tanks, in the sense that we assume that livestock water tanks are located on stream systems that are normally dry, and we consider normally dry would be dry 80% of the year. And so there's an assumption that by the time we'd have a call on a system, there'd be no inflow into that pond. And quite honestly, if there was, it probably wouldn't qualify as a livestock water tank. If in some event, though, there was water coming into that pond, we'd have to try to administer that thing, the pond, the livestock water tank, in priority, which is bypassing all inflow.
A couple more chat questions, and we have a few folks that have raised their hands. This is from Michael Hogue. What was the duration of the calls at Lilly Park? What upstream structures were affected? How was the call administered, and how much water was released?
Okay. So in 2018, the call lasted about 3 weeks. And then in 2020, I believe it just lasted around a week. And if one of the water commissioners can remember exactly how long that lasted, please jump in, but it was about a week. There were some releases made from Elkhead Creek Reservoir, both for the recovery program and just for flow enhancement, as well as the tri-state generation also left some water in the river during that time frame. So, Mike, I don't have exact numbers how much were released in both those years, specifically from Elkhead, and then of course water was released from Stagecoach. Definitely in 2018, not in 2020, but Stagecoach was still working under their 3 and 10 loan agreement. And 2018 was their third year, and that was with the Colorado Water Trust, but still water was released from Stagecoach in 2020. So we had Elkhead and Stagecoach in 2020, and actually later in the season we had some Steamboat Lake releases.
Great. I had another chat here from Moffat County. What is the process the state engineer will go through for public and government input before he makes the final decision? Can we have until the end of the year to permit existing wells and well ponds? What would be the harm in allowing time for this?
So yes, during that 30-day notification period, or when we do provide notice, there is a 30-day comment period. And Kevin or Tracy, I might need you to pipe up how they actually do provide comment, if that goes directly to the Denver office or to me, how that actually works. But there is that 30-day period where we receive comments and evaluate those comments, and both Kevin and I will be receiving those. Kevin or Tracy, you want to jump in there?
Would you like me to answer? Because there's, I think we can think of two phases to this. One of them, we're doing this tonight, and Erin has done just a lot of outreach. I know sort of one-to-one outreach that she's done with her water users. I know she's talked to the Roundtable and the River District and the Upper Yampa District. So all of that is just in the interest of communication and letting people know what's going on. Erin and I talked a few weeks ago about doing this much more public meeting, open meeting, so y'all would know what's going on. But to answer your question from Moffat County, Erin has put together a report and given me this recommendation that the basin become over appropriated. And that's really based on hydrologic fact and the concern about injury to senior water rights from continued groundwater development. So I need to look at that as a matter of hydrologic fact. But through tonight's meeting, as we talk about this during the meeting and any follow-up comments, I'm going to be very interested in concerns to make sure there's not something out there that we have missed. So, that's the process. And I think, Erin, we could invite comments for you and me. People can get our email addresses after tonight's meeting if you have follow-up. But certainly, as Erin said, through this notification process with the SWSP notification list, you'll have an opportunity to provide your comments. It's not an adjudicatory process, but it is something where we're definitely interested in hearing your comments. So that would be the process. And then for Moffat County to follow up, as far as time and the end of the year or some other time period, and what would be the harm in allowing time for this? I think the answer to that, Erin, you might want to answer this too, but the concern is the way the basin has changed, however that change came about, and it being on call more and more, future groundwater development, whether it be in 2 months or 2 years, will have that effect of injuring decreed water rights. And that's the basis for Erin doing this in the first place.
Yeah, and Kevin, I will just add that, during the notification process, people can continue to file for well permits. And we did this for the Elk River Basin. That was the last bigger river basin that we designated over appropriated here in Division 6. And we did allow an opportunity for people to apply for well permits at that time. And there were a lot of people that did take advantage of that. Taking note that, a residential well permit application has an expiration date 2 years after the approval of that well permit. And you can file for an extensions on that well permit. For general purpose well permits, if you filed one of those, it has a 1-year expiration, and you can file for a single extension on those. So there is an opportunity to file for those well permits before the actual date it's designated. And right now, Kevin and I have not picked a date as to when we will designate the basin over appropriate. So keep that in mind.
We have a couple hands up here, so I'm going to unmute Moffat County producers. So I just try to unmute yourself, Moffat County producers. If it's not working.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, there you go. Great.
This is Mike Camblin, and I'm standing in a room with, there's probably 15 or 18 people in here. So one of the questions I have, and actually it's directed towards Kevin. When I had a meeting with Erin Light and the county commissioners last week, she had told us that the numbers that she had used to figure this she would pass on to you, and then whether you made those available or not was up to you. So my thought is on this is the burden of proof needs to be on you guys. It shouldn't be on us to prove that this doesn't need to happen. The burden of proof needs to be on you. And, you know, this thing, actually, the ag producers should hug you over this, but we've got a lot of questions on this, and you need to make that right. You know, these Zoom meetings don't work very well for us. I'm standing in a room with 18 people, nobody's got a mask on. Maybe come see us, come visit with us. Be more transparent.
Oh, Kevin, I think you're still muted.
I sure am. I got that message on my screen. There are several things, and let me start at the end. I believe we are trying to be transparent. And in several different contexts, we are just really stuck with the situation. And you guys, you may want to remute yourself. I've heard a little feedback from my own voice, but we are unfortunately stuck with this situation where Tracy and Aaron and I are not allowed to travel, especially to locations, as you said, where there's 18 people without masks. That's just really imposed on us by the governor and by the Department of Natural Resources. So please regard this as our best effort and a good faith effort to be transparent and to communicate well. And, you know, in that regard, let's have the conversation tonight. We've got plenty of time. Let's continue to have the conversation. To get working backward to your question about the burden, and let me just clarify again, this is not an adjudicatory process or a granting of a water right or a determination of a water right. This is a scientific and hydrologic determination that the basin has changed over time, maybe due to an accumulation of newly granted water rights, maybe due to cumulative impacts from more and more well permits that are diverting groundwater. Maybe the climate changes have had an effect on what's happening. But in our internal guideline, where we really outline how we're going to make this determination, what we do is show that over time, there is a trend that Erin is having to place a call on the river. She is having to curtail water rights due to senior water rights not being satisfied. So that is the determination she's making, and she's taking into account that in many times she didn't have to place a call because water was introduced to the stream, so to speak, in an artificial way, put into the stream where it otherwise wouldn't be there, and that's helped keep the call off, so to speak. So that's really the determination we're making, and so the burden is Erin demonstrating through her recommendation to me that yes, she is having to place a call more and more frequently. What that means is that new groundwater diversions would be able to divert preferentially over decreed water rights. That's the concern when we talk about what's happened around the state and other basins. When we've had situations in the South Platte Basin, where wells were operating according to substitute water supply plans, that at the time were able to operate with more latitude. And we'd have a drought and surface water rights were being curtailed with priority dates in the 19-teens or 1900s. And yet people were seeing wells diverting. And these are wells with very junior water rights. That's what Erin is trying to do, is protect senior water rights. So that's a sort of a long-winded explanation of how we deal with that burden and how that burden is really in deference to decreed water rights. And to finish that all up, I meant what I said. Let's have the conversation right now, because that's exactly why we're all gathered here, is for you to ask those tough questions and keep asking them until you're satisfied with the answer.
Okay, we have a few more questions here. Another person with their hand up. Vermilion Ranch, T. Wright, I'm going to unmute you. I think you just need to unmute. There you go. Go ahead.
Aaron and Kevin, I appreciate the time tonight. Some of my questions have been asked, though not totally answered. First, and I appreciate what I've heard so far, my general question was around this public process. And so Kevin, has the report that Mike spoke about and Aaron said she submitted to you, has that been made public and available for affected interest to look at?
I'd like to have a chance to process the report myself, as it was submitted to me. But T. Wright, to answer your question, absolutely. This will be available to all parties. I think it would be most effective if I can review it and make sure Aaron and I are in agreement on what it says before we release it publicly. And that's not in an effort to hide anything or fail to be transparent. It's really just to make sure people are seeing what would be something that's final and not subject to change.
I appreciate that. I think along with that, though, needs to go some form of time extension. I heard, and I don't know if that was just descriptively mentioned, but May 1 as a decision date. If so, that seems to me to be a little fast. I well respect the fact that the Upper Valley has many more options in place for augmentation water. I know from some of my past hats that I've worn over the years, that is less so in the lower basin. And I've heard tonight a piece of this puzzle that I needed to understand about how that affected anyone building ponds or reservoirs. I think the ag community is appropriate in asking for some more time to better understand this, frankly, as is most of the lower basin. There has not, from my perspective, there's not been a great deal of change in the lower basin. I understand these calls. I think there has been concern about the manner in which those calls were made and for what purpose. But I think all of that is best discussed in a more open format than we can do tonight. And that's why I wanted to understand the public process by which you guys were going to make this decision. While this doesn't affect my district in 56, I understand the concerns that folks are expressing in the lower basin, and perhaps there is a way to solve some of the concerns that are more apparent with alluvials, aquifers in the upper basin, and more readily apparent depletions. But my knowledge of the lower basin, I have not seen a big change that is mentioned. So I do understand the concern that is expressed. I personally don't see the immediacy for which this is being proffered, but I think that's all best discussed amongst the parties and finding a way to come to some equitable resolution. So I hope that you will make that process work to that point. Thank you.
And Aaron, if I may jump in, you may have a thought too, but T. Wright, when you said at the end there, come to some equitable resolution, could you put that into context for me? Or what you meant by equitable resolution?
Yeah, from my perspective, I think this has the potential to do have a great deal of disruption in the lower valley that it's not prepared for, right or wrongly. And I think that clearly you've taken action in the past. It's apparent up valley when Aaron has identified issues, and to solve those, perhaps that can be done as well. But I have some deep reservations on a 30-day comment period where we're ping-ponging back and forth through emails. That's equitable for concerns in the lower basin. Thank you.
And just to be specific, you're probably speaking on behalf or with concerns for people that want to develop groundwater and put groundwater to beneficial use without having that obligation for an augmentation plan.
Well, and I think there are more than a few things in flux in terms of water rights in the lower basin and ability to augment the river. And I need to understand myself if an overappropriation designation is in fact one of the better ways to approach that, or if there are some other options. And at least to this point in time, I've not heard much discussion about what other options are available. I've heard the request for a designation, but not much conversation about other options.
Thanks.
And T-Ride, I appreciate that, and I will just I will say that I even hesitated using May 31st because I feared it would be taken out of context. I've made no specific date recommendation to Kevin as to the date at which time the basin be considered over appropriate. So do keep that in mind. And the other thing I think that Kevin and I can absolutely consider is whether 30 days is appropriate or a longer period of time for comment is more appropriate. And understand that, whether or not the system's over appropriated and how we're issuing well permits, the stream system will still have to be augmented if people want to allow junior diverters to continue to divert in event of a call or some potential injury to downstream water users. So this designation doesn't affect that. If you're going to have to augment junior surface diverters, you're going to have to augment junior surface diverters if that's what they want you to pursue, or the Moffat County folks to pursue. So know that this doesn't change that.
Aaron, I appreciate that, and I think that's what I was hearing in questions and comments from the lower valley is the ability to talk through some of that so that they understand the bigger picture that's in play here. Thank you all.
Thank you, T-Right. Chris, I do see that Travis Day has his hand up, but I also have noticed we've maybe missed a few chats. Maybe we could jump on a couple chats and then talk to Travis if that works for you.
Sure. And actually, Travis, there's one chat, then Travis has a chat as well. So maybe we can just call on him after I read this one.
Okay.
So this is from Ren Martin. Aaron, thank you. Do you have a concern this will have an opposite effect on ag senior water rights with increased value and overall result in increased dry up?
Yeah. And Ren, one reason I did want to get to that question because I thought it was a really good question and why I kind of wanted to jump back to the chats. I can tell you from my experience, Ren, the Yampa River has been over appropriated now upstream of the city of Steamboat Springs, well, since July 1st of 2006. I'm aware of one change of water right plan that has come through since then, and it was actually by the city of Steamboat Springs, drying up some of their own land that they had purchased and changing that use from ag or irrigation to their municipal use. It was a very small number of acres of land. That was the only change of water right I've seen since 2006 on the main stem of the Yampa upstream of the city of Steamboat Springs. On the Elk River, I haven't seen a single change, and the Elk River has been over appropriated now for January 1 this year marked 10 years, is that the Elk River has been under administration, and so no, or under a call. And so to answer your question, I've not seen any change of water right applications whatsoever. I take that back. I believe there was one, Marabou did apply for one, but it's just so limited. And so I can tell you, I don't envision seeing that happening a lot, where people are going to dry up senior ag rights so that they can use their well for increased or uses beyond in-house use only for a residential lot, 35 acres or less. So I think that's the best response I can give you, Ren, and it's what I've seen here based on other basins that have been designated over appropriate.
Okay, and I have a chat from Travis, and actually Travis has his hand raised, so I will unmute you, Travis. And just there you go.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, I asked the question, is this going to be, are you going to try to target the well drillers and stuff too? On like the ins and outs of the well permitting? If so, I can keep my questions until then, or I can just ask now. I just have a couple questions. Can you take a well permit that's good for 3 houses that's grandfathered in and change it to like a 1 house outside use and use the other 2 houses for an augment plan for another well? Because you're reducing the use of the well permit on that to drill a new well.
Well, no, I mean, one of my immediate questions was the other 2 dwellings in existence and using water. But again, I would say those well permits don't have water rights and are not, and so you can't really change a well permit for a use that really isn't a decreed use. But Kevin, I saw you turn off mute. You probably have a better answer than me on that one.
No, I think that was the perfect answer, Aaron. Those don't represent a water right or an amount of water. They're just an allowance under the statute. So no, you would not be able to, so to speak, trade that into use for augmentation.
Okay, because I know when they issue the permits, they calculate the use of water and stuff, but okay. And then, so if subdivision comes in and they need to get augment water, is there going to be, I know like in Rio Blanco County along the White River, there's the Yellow Jacket district that'll have water for augment. Is there anything in Moffat County that you know of, a special district that would have water that you could buy for an augment plan? Or would you just have to go out and find a rancher or something to get water from?
Right now, Travis, there is a group pursuing redeveloping. It's the Great Northern District that they're trying to reestablish that district. In which case, I believe, and I don't want to speak for those that are involved in trying to reestablish Great Northern, but it's my understanding they would pursue water from Elkhead Creek Reservoir. Otherwise, it's not uncommon for developers to develop or have a small augmentation pond on their property. Mm-hmm. And I can think of several in the Elk River Basin where they've done that, where they've developed their own on-site augmentation plan in their development.
Okay, and I do think it would be really helpful to have a reach out to all the drillers over in the area. There's not very many of us that, and let everybody know on this process. And you know, I could help with gathering everybody up for the Water Well Association, but I think it'd be really good to reach out to all of us too, separate.
Okay, thank you.
That's all I had.
Thank you.
If you don't mind me jumping in, Travis, we do have our hydrogeological services group that works under Tracy Kozloff's direction in Denver, and they work regularly with the Colorado Water Well Contractors Association, so we can certainly use that as a channel of communication too. I think that's a great idea. Yeah,
I see a couple of us on the meeting here, so that would be awesome if we can put some kind of an outreach meeting together for just the drillers.
Great thought.
Great, thanks, Travis. I'll do a few more chats here. I think you may have answered this, but this is from Luke Runyon. how soon could the final designation occur?
Yeah, Luke, as I indicated, that is not something that Kevin and I have finalized as to what date we would consider, at what date or time frame we would consider the basin over appropriate. So that hasn't been decided yet.
Okay. I'm going to go to, let's see, well, Miles' family, just someone that hasn't asked a question yet. And there's a few that have asked second questions. Miles' family, while 100 years may seem like a long time to have records available, what other models for addressing the water supply over time versus usage are available and or have been considered?
Well, I can say, Miles, that I have, again, I've done a lot of outreach, and one of the outreaches I have done was have a conversation with Wilson Water Group about all the modeling they've done for the basin implementation plan. And so, though I myself have not done any other evaluation, I have reached out to those who's done an extensive amount of work in the basin on modeling, and that was with I've had conversation with Wilson Water Group.
Chris, real quick, could we go back up to the question from Michael Hogue that I think was a good question? Unless I missed the answer to it.
No, I skipped over that one, just because he asked an earlier question. So yes, Michael Hogue, have any senior water rights holders expressed concerns about injury? If so, where are they located?
And Michael, I think one thing I've asked, I wonder here, when you say injury, I mean, injury is a result of this over appropriation designation, because, and I asked that and trying to get an understanding of what you mean by the question, because a senior water right holder is not going to be injured by this over appropriation designation. Rather, they're going to be protected from it. Otherwise, obviously, we've had administration and that a call on the river, and that call has resulted from a water user being unable to pump water because there's been no natural flow left for him to pump. So certainly, yes, he's expressed concern of injury, and why I've placed a call on the river.
Okay, Aaron or Kevin, if there's, I'm going to just go to the next new person. There's a couple of Moffat County questions here. I could do those, or should I just go to a newer person?
Let's jump in a couple on those Moffat ones. I do see that one about how soon will the report be available. Obviously, I plan to put the last couple touches on that report, hopefully even this week, and provide that to Kevin. Obviously, I've submitted him already a lengthy report, but there's a few additional touches I want to put on it after all of the communication and discussions I've had with the various folks. So I plan to submit that to Kevin very soon. I can't speak for Kevin how long it'll take him to act on it, but once he's made a determination or a decision, then it will become public.
Okay. Do you want to do this other Moffat County one?
Sure.
I can read it too.
Okay.
Since well permitting has moved to online versus in person, DWR's website makes it very difficult to determine which permit one needs to apply for. Also, the length of time it takes to hear back from anyone has increased considerably. What steps are being taken to improve these processes?
I could probably speak to that, Aaron, if that's helpful.
Thank you, Tracy. That'd be great.
So I don't know most of you all, but I do direct the group in the Denver office that issues most of the well permits for the state. And, you know, I'm sorry to hear that our new website is difficult, and also that response times have changed. We have in the last couple of months since we all went home last March, made some improvements to those issues. So we have several avenues that people can follow to get help for well permitting. We have our groundwater information desk, which was closed for probably the first 6 months of COVID-19, is now available. So there's a phone number that people can call 5 days a week between 9 and 4. It's our groundwater information desk, to ask questions, get direction about issuing well, or about how to apply for a well permit. We also have Ask DWR, which is sort of just a way to ask questions through our website. So those are two pretty good ways to be able to ask your questions directly and get an answer pretty quickly, either through our website or by calling our groundwater information phone line. And I can look up the phone number here.
It looks like Brian chatted. If you guys want to look at it, Brian put in the well information desk number. Okay, thank you, Tracy.
Should we do Dan Niamela?
Yeah.
Are river district contracts available for augmentation out of Elkhead?
So Dan, I'll say that contracts are available out of Elkhead, but right now there's no, plan for augmentation or anything developed from Elkhead. So there's not like an umbrella augmentation plan developed yet using Elkhead as a replacement source. So I think that answers your question, but there's contracts available, and the water right is decreed for augmentation use.
Great. Moffat County producers have a question from Keith, Pankey. So I will unmute you all. Should be able to go ahead there.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm Keith Pankey. I have a question on water wells. And over the years, we have had several water wells fail, whether it be domestic water or livestock water. What kind of stipulations have you got on replacement wells that do fail?
And Tracy, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but you can get a replacement well in an over-appropriate basin as long as it's for the same permitted uses. You can get a replacement well. I'm seeing Kevin shaking his head, so I think I answered that correctly.
Do you have to do an augmentation plan with that?
No, your replacement well permit would be for the same uses as your original permit without augmentation.
And maybe to Keith's point, it would be under the same finding of no injury that was made at the time of the application. So no augmentation.
Okay, anything else? Great. I don't see any more chats or anyone else raising their hand. Maybe folks have anything. We are nearing the top of the hour.
I still would like to, encourage people. I'm always available. I believe in this Zoom invite is all my information to contact me. You can contact me by email, my regular office phone number or my cell phone number. So feel free to call me. I will tell you that I do field a lot of well permit questions. I prefer them primarily to go through the Denver office, but it's not uncommon for people to call me for well permitting questions, and I will answer all the questions that I can. Thank you, Chris, for chatting that. So Chris just put all my information in the chat.
All right. We're at 7 o'clock. Aaron, did you just want to wrap it up, or Kevin, or final comments?
I think I'll just, emphasize again, once Kevin has read through my evaluation and made a determination, if he does determine that the basin should be designated over appropriated, that the report will be made public. And we will go through a notification period where we'll allow and accept comments. And as T. Wright encouraged, more than 30 days would be appreciated, and absolutely, Kevin and I will look at that and see what an appropriate time period is. So I would say those are really the next steps.
We're all good?
I'll just
Kevin,
add-
you gonna say something?
Yeah, well, Aaron has done such a good job. I wanted to avoid just feeling like I had to say something more, but I appreciate Aaron really describing the process. And I just want to emphasize, this is Aaron's best effort at being transparent under our current conditions. This is our best effort to travel to your location. So I want to thank Aaron for that. And in that regard of openness, please take advantage. If you do have a concern right now, email Aaron or me, and we'll see whether we can answer your question and address that concern.
Okay. Thank you all very much for participating. I appreciate it. I think we can go ahead and call it good, Chris. Thank you.